Watch this, the forearm technique every provincial coach drills, but most amateur players completely ignore, and it's killing your consistency. I've heard people say you don't need to use the forearm, just keep a fixed angle and push through with the upper arm. If you're learning from me, I want you to accept the professional approach. Any qualified coach will tell you to snap the forearm. The real question is when to snap it, and how much, that depends on the incoming ball. I was trained in Sichuan province under some of the best coaches in Chinese table tennis, and every one of them drilled forearm mechanics from day one. So if you trust my background, understand that we absolutely need to extend and contract the forearm. How much you use depends on the incoming ball. Now, how do we make sure the upper arm and forearm stay properly separated? It comes down to your backswing. Let me demonstrate. Watch closely. When I open the forearm during the backswing, I'm not pulling my elbow or upper arm backward. That's a common mistake. The forearm extends away from the upper arm right here. Watch, this is a forehand drive. See how the forearm opens? This is what proper forearm extension looks like. Look carefully at just the forearm. The separation happens here, not by dragging the elbow behind you. You're not pulling the shoulder or yanking the elbow back. Within this framework, the relationship between the upper arm and forearm is critical. Even on the fastest ball, I still need that forearm extension in the backswing. The two parts should never stick together and push forward as one unit. That's actually the main reason many players can't generate real power. Next, the second key relationship is the direction of the upper arm. Watch, the elbow tip always points downward, which means the upper arm hangs down naturally. If the upper arm points backward instead, you end up with a raised shoulder, and that creates problems. So the upper arm stays directed downward at all times. To adjust for different ball heights, you use the shoulder and the forearm together. Watch, when I lift the forearm, that's a drive. When I angle the forearm slightly back, that's for topspin. When I drop the forearm and lower the shoulder, that's for backspin. The forearm is what makes the adjustment. Even when the ball is high, the upper arm must not rise up. The moment you lift and brace the shoulder and upper arm, you're in trouble. This is exactly why many recreational players miss half-high balls. They raise the whole arm like this. Even on a high ball, the upper arm still points downward. You bring the forearm up to meet it, and you strike like this, not like this. Watch, the instant the upper arm comes up, errors follow. So the upper arm's direction is always downward. On short balls, drives, loops, all of it. Now let's talk about the forearm specifically. Now let's revisit the forehand side. As I said, the forearm must contract, but to what degree? That's the crucial question. The amount of forearm you use depends on your distance from the table. The closer you stand, the greater the forearm's share of the work. For a forehand drive up close, 70 to 80% of the stroke is forearm. Step back to about 1 meter from the table, and the ratio shifts to roughly 50-50 between forearm and upper arm. From far back, the upper arm does more of the work. The forearm might only contribute 20%. But it depends on your position at the table. Players who stand right up against the table, close to the bounce point, need much more forearm involvement. Please remember that. Don't buy into the idea that the forearm isn't needed. That theory will ruin your game. Standing close and swinging with only the upper arm, without snapping the forearm, sends the ball long every time. The closer you stand, the higher the forearms. Then the forearm is always used, but it must coordinate with the upper arm. For example, on a topspin ball, from the moment your backswing ends and the racket meets the ball, you should not snap the forearm closed prematurely. That's overusing the forearm. Watch, this is the problem. Same thing on backspin. If I'm looping against backspin and I do this, that's excessive forearm contraction, and it's a key mistake. After that, now let's look at how the upper arm works. Take the forehand drive. During the backswing, the shoulder, upper arm, and elbow should be driven forward by the body's rotation, moving out to meet the ball first. At this stage, your arm holds its shape like this. The upper arm pushes forward to intercept the ball. Feel that it's a pressing, meeting sensation. Watch closely. Step 1. Achieve this feeling of driving forward and pressing into the ball. Step 2. From that contact point, the forearm folds forward and slightly upward. Now watch the characteristics of this forearm contraction. Let me turn to the side so you can see clearly. Notice anything. Look at the range of motion. The contraction range is actually small. The forearm folds while pressing forward. It doesn't swing through a big arc. Two critical takeaways here. First, the forearm always contracts in a forward-pressing direction, not a sweeping one. Moving on, second point. The forearm contraction isn't about folding your arm as far as it can go. Some players contract so much the racket ends up blocking their own line of sight. That's way too much. The forearm contraction is really just the braking phase after acceleration. Watch, it stops right here, it stops here. You don't need to fold it much further. If you overcontract, you'll lose control of your arc and the ball sails long. Think about it. If the racket face is slightly open and you contract through a big range, the ball will fly past the end of the table every time. You need to keep that arc short and compressed, especially when you're standing close to the table. At this distance, a long sweeping arc sends everything out. You have to press the arc forward and down. Table tennis is all about controlling that arc. Next, so don't bring the racket too close to your body, stop about here. And don't finish too high either. The standard finishing position is the racket head between your nipples, not your hand at that height, the racket head. And certainly not your forearm at that height. Watch as I demonstrate. After the forward press, the contraction range is actually quite small. Notice the upper arm and elbow stay essentially fixed throughout. The forearm folds inward just this much. Once you're competing and adjusting to different balls and situations, you can fine-tune. But first you need a textbook standard, a reliable baseline to build from. Watch closely. First, the upper arm stays still. Second, see, the upper arm and elbow don't move. Now the forearm, there's a small inward contraction, then it stops. 1, 2, 3, that range is about acceleration, not about how big the angle change is. There should be a burst of speed followed by a deliberate break. Watch again, 1, 2, small range, clean break. This is critical. Without a consistent stopping point, the stroke will never be stable. So on the forehand, you need to give the forearm a standard breaking position. Watch, I swing and stop right here. This is why, when we were kids, our coaches had us rally hundreds of balls in a row. They made us stop the racket at one fixed spot every single time. Not here one moment, there the next, wandering all over, that's no good. You need to know this is the foundational frame. Once that frame is locked in, you can adjust. A little faster, stop here, more spin, stop there, slightly to the left, stop there. Those adjustments come from match play. But at this stage, we need the textbook standard first.